Okay, so we have to talk about the NBA gambling scandal that basically went viral yesterday on Thursday. And this is really kind of like the sports equivalent of what everybody is talking about when it comes to Congress and how people just go to Washington to get rich. And there seems to be this need to really control how people are engaging with the stock market. Now, if you think about the sports world, the organizations, the leagues themselves, and the players, they are a variation of stock. And so it is really shocking when you hear about this gambling story and how people are involved in fixing games and really just compromising the integrity of sports itself. And this scandal is really different because usually when you hear about athletes, you do hear about kind of like petty or one-off crimes, or you hear about domestic violence, or you hear about athletes being taken advantage of by friends and family or by their accountant who steals all of their money, right? And so you don't usually see something kind of this elaborate and this deliberate when it comes to organized crime. And what also makes this situation unique is because I think in a general sense, you can have friends who bet on a sports game and it's really casual, it's not super serious, it's not probably going to be a super high amount to where anybody feels like they're being taken advantage of, right? And so when you have sports betting, that is a whole different ball game. And I think that this is something that actually puts the athletes in danger because just by the nature of what they do, they have a lot of eyes on them. They have people who want to hang around them. They have people who want to use them for a come up and all of that stuff. And so they are put in a dangerous position when it comes to just being a public figure and having so much influence on the rest of society, especially when it comes to sports betting. However, I think it is super important to highlight that athletes also have a responsibility. They have not this easy opportunity to make money and provide for their family, but they have a legitimate opportunity to do so. They've spent their whole lives getting to this moment where they can play a sport and get paid well for it. Now, if you take away the NIL, you really had to put in the hard work of being good at what you do so that you could make it to the pros and get paid the big money. Before that, you did not get paid in high school and college. And so I think people are really taking for granted the opportunity that they have to make money playing basketball, football, soccer, and all of the other sports. Now, it does make me wonder because it's so easy to make money, or it's much easier to make money than it was probably 50 years ago. Either you needed a corporate job or you became a athlete, you became a rapper, you became an entertainer, right? And so now you can make money on social media. And so I think there is kind of this not devaluation of hard work, but it seems like it's so easy to make money and it's not always in the right ways. And it makes people lose sight of having legitimate jobs, providing for your family, and focusing on the things that really matter. This is Hey Brittany. Welcome back. Okay, so let's get into the details of the case, what we know so far. So this is really centered around illegal gambling and a sports rigging operation. Over 30 people were arrested, and I think that they said that all of this was kind of being tracked across 11 states. And this is a years-long investigation that goes back to 2019, I believe. And in 2018, they basically overturned the ban on sports betting. So I believe from 1992 to 2018, nobody could bet on sports. And for athletes in particular, they had really strict rules on this. Now with the ban on sports betting being overturned and it's now legal to bet and gamble on sports, this has really intertwined sports and the betting world to where it leaves people questioning whether or not what they are seeing on the court and on the field and all of that stuff is actually real, or is it people just compromising the integrity of the sport to make a quick buck. Now, as far as the names that we have had dropped so far, we've had different members of crime families mentioned, and then we've also had Chauncey Billups, Terry Rozier, and then also Damon Jones or Damian Jones. I'm not sure how you say his first name. Now, from what I read, they had this one machine that would basically tell you, I guess, how the cards were dealt and who had the best hand. They rigged this machine to kind of tell them all of that information, and then they communicated that to other people who were involved in the scheme that was going on. And then they also mentioned that people had special glasses to be able to read the cards that were marked in a certain way. And so this is a very elaborate scheme that has a lot going into it in order to help certain people make money. Now, why are men who are super wealthy, who have a lot of money, who have a lot of fame, who have a lot of influence, it seems like men in this position, everything should come easier to them than it does for the rest of society, people who have regular jobs, who probably don't make as much money as a NBA player would. Why exactly are they throwing everything away for a gambling habit? What this really comes down to is men wanting to risk everything for a thrill, and or they could be put in situations where they feel like they have to do this. They don't really have a choice. Now, what I want to point to is one of my favorite TV shows of all time, One Tree Hill, and this is actually the perfect example, and I wish that more people paid attention to what happened in TV shows and seeing how that could affect you in your real life. So in One Tree Hill, Nathan Scott was a star basketball player, and what ended up happening was he got married to his high school sweetheart. They had a kid. He emancipated himself because he did not like living with his parents. It was really chaotic. And then he was basically strapped for cash, and he was approached by a bookie, and the bookie was played by Rick Fox. Rick Fox, if you're not aware of who he is an NBA player, and it's very ironic that you have a NBA player in this role acting out what happens when a star athlete gets involved in the wrong crowd, the point shaving, gambling, all of that stuff, right? And so in One Tree Hill, Nathan shaved points, and he got his half brother Lucas involved, and this was kind of like a messy thing, and Nathan was supposed to make them lose a championship game, and I think they decided not to throw the game, and then he was like, hey, I'm done, I'm not participating in this anymore, and then Haley got ran over because Rick Fox, his character, lost a lot of money, so he was extremely pissed at Nathan for what happened. And so what you're seeing in this TV show is what happens when you have an athlete who is in a compromising position. This again points to everything that we're seeing now. There could be a lot of elements here. There could be people who were forced into this position. There could be people who were just in it for the thrill and then just got in over their heads at some point. And there could be people who wanted to do this. They knew what they were doing, and now they will pay the consequences for that. Now, unlike Nathan Scott in this fictional TV show of One Tree Hill, these were star athletes who had a lot of money, who had a lot of wealth, and so they did not have to go this route. But when you think about people who are exposed to other people, they have people who want to hang around them, who want to know them, all of that stuff, it does become kind of more complicated and more difficult to keep a level head, to stick to your morals and your values, especially if you have a lot to lose. And all of these athletes have a lot to lose. And what I think most people don't realize is that when you play professional sport, you are really living a fast lifestyle compared to the average person. So it's almost like being in that hip hop and that drug culture where you are doing something that normal, ordinary people don't do, and you make a lot of money from it, and it gives you a false sense of the world. And so I'm not saying that athletes aren't to blame, especially if they are willingly putting themselves in this situation, but I think two things can be true at once. You can have these athletes who are rich and they're famous, and they think that they are above the law, they think that they can do whatever they want, and then you can have athletes who truly are victims of different situations that only occur to them or only happen to them because of who they are and the role that they play, the job that they have, the amount of money that they make. Okay, so now let's talk about the quality of basketball. So I used to watch basketball a lot in the early 2000s. That was when I was the most active playing it, and it was really enjoyable watching basketball. And I remember watching, because I was a huge Carmelo Anthony fan, and so I would watch the Denver Nuggets play a lot. And because they're a West Coast team, their games came on super late. And I remember, I think it was Carmelo Anthony's rookie year, and they made it to like the first round of the playoffs, and their games are super late. And I just remember staying up till 1 a.m. and just like watching the game and being really into it and being happy when they won. And then I think they got knocked out maybe late in the series or something like that, right? And so anyway, it was really fun watching basketball. It was really engaging, and you wanted to watch it. It felt like it was more competitive, especially when you had the bad boy Piston, you had Allen Iverson, you have Kobe and all of those guys, and it just seemed like a completely different world than the basketball that I see on television today. The last time I feel like basketball was really good was the Warriors and the Cavs rivalry, and then also the Warriors and the Miami Heat. So basically the Warriors versus LeBron James wherever he was. But I also want to point out that the NBA has really been different from college basketball. With college basketball, there's a lot more fundamentals and there's a lot more at risk, especially before the NIL, because you wanted to make sure that you didn't lose your eligibility, that you didn't do anything stupid that would jeopardize your chances of getting to the NBA. With the NBA, they're more kind of lax on the fundamentals. Not everybody plays defense, and it's just a different kind of game than the high quality game that you see played in college. On top of that, people don't really like what they're seeing with the NBA as far as how people are dealing with load management. So people are needing to take games off because of injury, or they need to rest, because I think most teams play 80 plus games a year. They're not playing these games across a 12-month schedule. I believe the NBA season is about maybe 8 or 9 months, and so they are playing a lot of games in a short time span if you really think about it. Okay, so let's talk about some recent events and also recent reaction about this whole NBA scandal. So when I first heard about it, it actually made me think of Ayesha Curry's viral tweet from 2016, and it reads, "I've lost all respect. Sorry, this is absolutely rigged for money or ratings. I'm not sure which. I won't be silent. Just saw it live. Sorry." So I don't know if this was the exact tweet that she made, but this is what I was able to find online, and I'm not sure if this tweet is still up. And I don't even remember what series it was, but I believe it was the Warriors versus either the Cavs or the Miami Heat. I can't recall the details, but basically her team, Steph Curry's team, the Warriors, they may have lost a game, or it may have been a huge play and a call didn't go their way, and she responded with this, I think either in the middle of the game or after the game. And this was a big deal because this is a star NBA player's wife, and she's basically calling out the NBA for being rigged, which is a huge no-no considering the family that she comes from and the status that she has as an NBA wife. And so this was a huge thing, and it really put a negative spotlight on the NBA as far as how their games were going, how refs are calling the plays and all of that stuff. And so when you think about basketball, there is a lot that goes into it. It's not just people putting a ball through a hoop and all of that stuff. There really is a lot that goes into it that impacts other people, from the people who are betting, from the people who are calling the game, because even the refs get a lot of attacks, especially when they make the wrong calls and they really impact the outcome of the game. And so that's a huge thing. And the refs, you can't always criticize what they do or you get fined. And so it's what people say in the post-game interviews that influence all of this stuff, right? And so it's a much more intense game than people realize, especially when you have huge contracts, you have a lot of money on the line. This is just not something that people take very lightly to. And so the fact that you have this huge scandal around sports rigging and then illegal gambling from people who are involved in the NBA, whether as a coach, a current player, or a former player, just the fact that this is associated with the NBA, which is one of the sports that I pay attention to the most, even though I said I don't watch it as much, I'm always going to be familiar with the NBA, more so than the NFL or MLB and all of that stuff, right? And so when you have a huge story like that, it does make a huge impact. Now, moving on from Ayesha Curry, we've also had other people from the NBA get in trouble for various issues. So recently we had Marcus Morris, and he was arrested over a $265,000 debt to a casino, and he was arrested. It made the headline, and it wasn't as big of a story as this one because obviously that is involving one player. It's a smaller situation than what we're seeing with this sting and this operation, even though $265,000 is a lot of money, especially to the average person. And again, this just speaks to how rich men or men who have the opportunity to make a lot of money, how are they spending their time? Are they doing this because they need that thrill, because they're competitive? Are they doing that because they're bored? What is it that is driving men to make these decisions where they are putting their livelihood and their reputations at risk? And then moving on, we had 18 NBA players arrested with a health insurance scheme. And I believe if you are a NBA player, when you retire, you get free health insurance. And I'm not sure if that's the case when you are actively playing, but basically these 18 players filed false claims and they would have, I guess, been reimbursed for whatever money they spent. But this ended up being some sort of fraud situation that NBA players were associated with. And I believe about $4 million was what was alleged to have been stolen. So you can see that multiple NBA players are coming up in these different kind of white collar crimes, and that's not something that you really see to this degree. Then we had Michael Porter Jr.'s brother, I think his name is Jonte Porter, and he was banned from the NBA, I think in 2024, and he was banned because he was involved in gambling and sports betting, and he was basically given information and changing his performance and all of that stuff because of these bets that were being made. Okay, so now let's get into Kash Patel's comments. So he is the FBI director, and he made a statement on this new NBA gambling scandal.
Individuals such as Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, and Terry Rozier were taken into custody today. Former, current NBA players and coaches. What you don't know is that this is an illegal gambling operation and sports rigging operation that spanned the course of years. The FBI led a coordinated takedown across 11 states to arrest over 30 individuals today responsible for this case, which is very much ongoing. Not only did we crack into the fraud that these perpetrators committed on the grand stage of the NBA, but we also entered and executed a system of justice against La Casa Nostra to include the Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese crime families.
Okay, so that's the end of the clip, and so you can see there they're talking about how there's NBA players, they named specific NBA players who were arrested in relation to this operation, and then they also mentioned a few families tied to the mafia. And so this is really interesting because here what they are exposing is fraud, and they're saying, hey, you know, this is something that we've had our eye on for a while, and we want to make sure that justice is served. The reason why I wanted to play this clip is because I'm going to play a clip from Stephen A. Smith, and he referenced this comment or this statement from Kash Patel. He thought it was a big deal that the FBI director was speaking on this case, and he was tying it back to Trump and how Trump is basically on a mission to root out all of the criminal activity and hold people accountable for whatever they're doing that they should not be doing. So we can go ahead and play that clip from Stephen A. Smith.
Big night for the NBA. Wembanyama put on a show. That has now been smeared because we're talking about this story, okay? Remember, Trump has a long, long history connected to the world of sports because he had those casinos. Where do you think folks were coming half the time? I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about the culture. When people want to go to a casino, when people want to gamble, when people want to party, or whatever the case may be. This was his kind of connection to that. Why am I glad you're here, Monica? Because don't be surprised if the WNBA is next on his list. Because when you've got all of these protests that have been going out there and people that have been...
I want to pause it here because what he's basically saying is that Trump has ties to casinos. He owns casinos. He's involved in that world. What he's saying is maybe Trump knew that this activity was happening. I'm interested in what he really means here, what he's getting at here, but I don't fully understand the Trump connection that he's making here. But I think that is interesting that he said what he has said so far.
To me, this is the latest nugget of evidence that we're talking about right here. That's not to question the legitimacy of the case. We don't know. We're all sitting up here and we're saying that we don't know. But anybody that has been around him, anybody that has talked to him, anybody that has seen his reactions from the sports leagues and the positions that people have taken, they are not surprised at what's going on today. I'm watching a press conference with the director of the FBI. Tell me when we've seen that. We've seen people, we've seen accusations before. We've seen athletes get in trouble with the law before. You don't see the director of the FBI having a press conference.
I want to pause it here because I think that's more so because of how elaborate this situation is and the fact that it's an organization, whereas it's not like just one person having an altercation or whatever with another person. And so I think that the fact that there's so many people involved, and then also probably the ties to the mafia and all of that stuff, I think that is why this case is making headlines, because it would be very weird if it didn't, and you would need the FBI or whoever is involved in investigating the situation to make an official statement, especially because of how high profile the NBA is. This isn't something that you can just kind of not say anything about, especially given how many people tune in every night to watch a basketball game, a football game, and all of that stuff. We know who these people are when you throw out their names and say, hey, so-and-so was arrested. We're all going to want to kind of pay attention to a story and see what happens.
It's not coincidental. It's not an accident. It's a statement. And it's a warning that more is coming. And that's what they're saying here. And everybody better, I'm just telling you, it's as serious as it gets. This ain't the platform for me to get into it the way I'm going to get into it. But I've been saying he's coming. He's coming because in his eyes, folks try to throw him in jail. In his eyes, he's innocent. They try to put me behind bars. I'm getting everybody. He's not playing. And so this, in a lot of people's eyes, talk to people in the NBA, talk to people in the NFL, talk to people in the world of sports. They think this is like the tip of the iceberg. These are the kind of words that are coming out of people's mouths. It's not a surprise. It's very disheartening. It's very concerning. We don't know where this is going to go. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Everybody's better brace themselves because
So I think that is really crazy, because if this really is the tip of the iceberg and you're going to have even bigger names that drop that have ties to this, not necessarily as victims, but as perpetrators, I think that is going to be really awful. And then I don't know who bears the responsibility, because one, you had this law in place where basically from 1992 to 2018, nobody could bet on sports. And if you did, then obviously you got in legal trouble, right? And so them overturning that in 2018 is what set all of this in motion and allowing this to happen. You put the players at risk because, as I mentioned earlier, you do have people who are getting death threats over how they perform and whether or not their team wins and all of that stuff. And people have access to these players. They can tweet whatever they want. They can show up to games. They can be rude and disrespectful at games. And they can even, when they see these people in public, approach them and all of that stuff, right? And so the protection was removed when you overturned this ban and made this happen. They should have anticipated that something like this would eventually happen, because I feel like that's not something that you can control without having a strict legal law in place to prevent this sort of behavior. And really, they should have just left that law in place, because it's for the athletes and the organization's protection, and then it's also for the victims' protection. If this is illegal, you're less likely to participate in it, and that's just something that you really want to do. And the people who really want to do this stuff, no matter what, who are going to face the consequences of that. And so I think that this is probably not necessarily a setup, but this is definitely something that could have been prevented. Okay, so next up, I want to talk about Jason Whitlock. And so he made some comments reacting to this, and he specifically called out LeBron James, hip hop culture, and we can just go ahead and play the clip.
At work here. And if you look at the sports world, and if you look at the NBA, who runs the NBA? Who have been the commissioners of the NBA? Who are predominantly the owners of NBA franchises? Who are the people that have ushered in, and this is in the NFL as well, but not as pronounced, but who's ushered in all the gambling elements?
I want to pause here, so that just goes back to what I was saying about the sports ban being overturned, and then now kind of you have this flooding of sports betting, and that directly impacts the players, whether they get directly involved in it or they are being kind of held responsible for when other people make bets and they lose money, and so they're mad at the players and they lash out. And so this has created a very dangerous situation for everyone involved.
Partnered with the gambling elements. And then who had the people that are primarily in control of the NBA? Who are their players? Who are the entertainers that they pay this large sums of money to entertain people on the court? And then who have those players befriended and operate with and watch the movies about and fantasize about being like them.
I find this comparison very interesting because I think that NBA players, even though they probably have rap artists and all of that stuff that they kind of admire, I think that people would put athletes and NBA players above rappers. So I think in the early 2000s, rappers were definitely bigger than NBA players. So like if there was a rapper sitting courtside, you were kind of impressed that they were there to watch you. And I think that this is important because we know that in the late 80s, early 90s, rap culture was a huge thing. That was what people were using to push and influence the Black community to behave a certain way and accept certain behaviors and all of that stuff. And so now you kind of see that with the NBA players, they are the ones who are promoting it more so than the rappers. And I think that that is an interesting comparison that he's making, because I don't know if it's that these NBA players are aspiring to be like the rappers and the drug lords and all of that stuff. And you do see some people who are not as successful of a basketball player, a pro athlete, who do switch into these other industries and all of that stuff. But I think it's because they're not as successful at basketball, and so they switch to something else.
This is a league dominated by Jews, players that are black, who think, many of them think, because of hip hop culture, who think that they're Italian mafia bosses or black Italian mafia bosses. Who did LeBron James send a shout out to when he got released from prison? And I'm emoting right now and thinking off the top of my head, but it was the dude from that they made a TV show, Black Mafia Family, big somebody that just got released from prison in Florida. Someone help me out here.
So I want to pause it here because I know that there was a mixed reaction to the, like, one, should you be happy that this person got out of jail, especially for someone of LeBron's stature to be acknowledging that. And I think this goes back to the fact that a lot of these people that I'm talking about, that I've mentioned so far in this video, I think a lot of them are between 30 and 50, where they would have grown up in the 80s and the 90s, and they would have been directly influenced by the hip hop culture that really made an impact on the Black culture. And so they're conditioned to that. They are heavily influenced by that. And I think that they have kind of taken over that, and they are the promoters of that behavior. And so I think that that's really interesting that he's talking about LeBron acknowledging someone getting released from prison, but also on the other hand, the guy served his time. He paid the price for the crimes that he committed. And so in that sense, is it really fair to be like, oh, you shouldn't glamorize this person coming home or whatever? But I just don't know if that is a fair comparison, especially with this person being released from prison. His name is literally everywhere. There's a song, So Excited, that I think came out 8 years ago, that has Fat Joe on it, and it mentions Big Meech. And I don't know if I've heard of him before that song came out. And then obviously the Black Mafia TV show, and I think 50 Cent is kind of like spearheading that, like that's his show. And so he is the one who is glamorizing and promoting Big Meech's story, right? And that show is entertaining, just like his Power series is entertaining. And so I think that that's not something that you can blame LeBron for necessarily when you consider that he is a product of that hip hop culture. That is what you would have seen other people trying to emulate and copy. And now you have that generation of young men who are in their prime now, and they are the ones who are influencing the culture, and that is how they're going to influence people. So you really have to have a strong pro athlete who has rejected all of that, who is still making a lot of money, who is still influential, and who still has an impact to where you see them not emulating that behavior, and they're promoting family, good values, and all of that stuff. And so I think that not necessarily that I'm saying that LeBron is promoting bad behavior. I think you have to put it into perspective how these people would have grown up and what they would have been exposed to understand why certain players and certain athletes are getting involved in these crimes now, and it's being exposed. The other reaction that I want to get into is Kevin Love, and so this one is him basically tweeting memes, making fun of the situation, and some people got mad at him for this because obviously this is a very serious situation and it compromises the integrity of sports itself, and then obviously it ruins the reputation of the people involved. And so Kevin Love tweeted the Coldplay meme of that CEO who got caught with his side chick at a concert, and obviously that ruined their relationships. I think they're both getting divorces and all of that stuff, and so that is not a good situation for those two people to have been put in publicly and all of that stuff, right? And so he posted a meme of, I think, Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier in that position that the couple was found in. And so when you take a first glance at it, it is pretty funny because you understand what that moment means, but at the same time, people were upset because it's kind of like making light of the situation. But you also have to understand that the people who willingly got involved in this organized crime, they put themselves in that position, and it's really unfortunate when you're dealing with people who have a lot of fame, a lot of money, but it comes down to what your morals are, what your values are. Do you value money and fame and friends over your family and just having a good life and making good decisions? What is more important to you? And that's not always going to be an easy decision. Sometimes you're going to lose friends along the way. Sometimes you have to separate from people who you know don't have your best interest. And so it'd be very interesting to see how this plays out, what other names are released or connected to this scandal, and how does this affect the sports world going forward, and how does this affect how people think about sports, how seriously do they take what they're watching, because basketball can be a very beautiful thing to watch, especially when you're watching two teams going at it hard and playing a very competitive game that is just beautiful to watch. I really want the NBA and basketball in general to get back to that high level of play that we used to see in the early 2000s. Alrighty, so I'm going to wrap up this video. Let me know what your thoughts are on this NBA gambling scandal. Are you surprised that this happened? What else are you expecting to hear come out of this situation? What are your thoughts on pro sports in general? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.